I had a difficult weekend as a result of COVID-19. I went to the ER on a Thursday evening, almost a week after my symptoms began, and spent the weekend sleeping and feeling quite weak. I watched a lot of television, but do not recall much of it. On Sunday evening, we decided to phone my mother and ask her to babysit our 4 children, all under 6. She promised to come over on Monday morning. I washed and dressed on Monday morning, but I was exhausted. I proceeded down the stairs and inquired about my mother's arrival time with my wife. She stated that she had recently left Sandy, about 25 minutes away. Before passing out, I weighed this against my capacity to breathe and respectfully begged her to call an ambulance, which she did. When the ambulance arrived, I was awake enough to meet them as they carried me into the vehicle. I recall a little piece of the journey as well, but not much more. According to my wife, they had to rip my clothing off and start inserting tubing down into my lungs right away. My groggy body battled with this, and I vomited forcefully. They then put me to sleep with something. I believe that the combination of the medications utilized, as well as my body's negative reaction to and misunderstanding of the breathing tube, caused my mind to spiral downward. In reality, I had a number of hallucinations while in the hospital. They were threatening to murder me, I was told. I'm a religious man, but my mentality had become so negative that I could not bring myself to pray or even think about it. My mind was fogged up with confusion, dread, and rage. I was in a daze for approximately a week, but it felt like I was in the hospital for 3 months. Back at home, my wife was encouraging and optimistic. She had prayed for me to be comforted by the memories of my children, who had died in 2007 and 2016 as a result of the same genetic abnormality. Other members of my family were concerned that any such encounter would lead me in the direction of the 2 children I had missed so much. I had 4 lovely children, all under the age of 6, waiting for me at home. Apparently, they did not have much faith in my ability to meet my commitments. I was in the midst of many hallucinations, all of which were bad and occurred within the hospital and my hospital room. I cannot express how terrible my thinking had gotten enough. To spare myself from the torment of those hallucinations who wished to murder me, I sought a means to commit myself. My body was running out of energy, yet I was in a state of complete terror. I must have pressed the nurse's call button 1,000 times, but when they came into my room a few times, they ignored the look of terror on my face. They had believed I was aware of the big tube in my mouth. The tube, to me, was something that was preventing me from breathing. I had no idea the tube was breathing for me. I wanted to die once I realized the nurses did not care, but I held out hope and kept breathing. My body eventually gave up, and I breathed my last breath. Of course, the machine was still breathing for me, but this particular breath had me completely exhausted. I imagined that I had worked hard and that I would be okay if I just let myself die. I was irritated that I had not died yet. I was still sitting in the hospital room with the TV on full blast. I had no visits throughout my whole hospital stay and no one to encourage me to relax or that everything will be okay. My mind was in a really negative and foolish state. I wanted to create articles about Transformers sequences. To put it another way, I was in big danger. But then I found myself somewhere else than my hospital room. I was in a building that looked like a subway, with no angles or edges, but plenty of gaps. There was light, yet there were no light bulbs. The room smelled clean and beautiful, although there were no flowers in sight. I believed I was utilizing a virtual reality phone program since I knew I could not really move from my hospital bed. Of course, no such technology exists, but that was my only explanation. I was aware that I was confined to a hospital bed. I could not wait for my wife to open her app and come here to talk about my dreadful 3 months. I became aware of the presence of a woman and a man as I waited. Not a married pair, but a group of 30-somethings that had been a large and close part of our life. This was delivered to me without the use of words. A woman approached, while the male remained silent. I knew he was around, yet I did not feel compelled to pursue him. I was overcome with these people's affection. I could feel it intensely, and things about them just spoke to my heart. For a brief period, still believing this was an application, I considered asking them their names. However, I recognized them and they seemed so familiar that it felt it would be awkward, if not humiliating, to approach them. Nobody needed to tell me that they loved me because I already knew. Without words, it was stated to me that my tiny family had become their life's work, and I felt terrible. Did they not have their own families to take care of? I mistakenly left this location, never seeing an app, but yet presuming that this was an application. I found myself back at the hospital, performing my old feeble-minded pranks. Once again, everything was bleak, and there was no hope. I envisaged giving myself a concussion in the hopes of dying once the needles and chemicals were no longer supporting my non-breathing body. In an attempt to flee, I moved about forcefully, causing deep tissue wounds on my face. But then I returned. The contrast between tranquility and worry was dramatic, but not as dramatic as the difference between the love I felt in this new environment and my other sensation I had had in my 40 years. Something was different about the affection I felt here. The beauty, light, and the scent of the site are indelible in my memories, but none compared to the sensation of love in this spot. This woman greeted me once more. The man was nearby once more. The emotion was there once more. I went around slowly, appreciating this woman's attractiveness with innocent eyes. I was perplexed as to why she had chosen to care for our family and our children for so long. We grinned and took in the scenery, a panoramic vista of the outdoors that stretched for miles. It felt as if we were on an island in the sky, but the limits of the land were obscured by a dazzling haze. The woman remained calm. She assured me that I would be well and that we will be reunited. While I found it odd that she would associate herself with the family, her remarks were taken as genuine. It was something I knew in my heart and head. I'm not sure why there was no uncertainty from that moment on, but I knew I would be okay. I was immediately relaxed when I returned to my hospital room. I stopped resisting the attachments because I knew I was going to be okay. Over the next several days, they removed the ventilator and replaced it with an oxygen mask. As I rested for the following few days, I reflected on that woman. I knew she cared about us, but I could not recall if she was a neighbor, a relative, or an old acquaintance of my wife's. I was concerned about her living circumstances. If she cared about us so much, why would not we have a room for her in the basement, something to rescue her if she was renting somewhere else? There was such a profound yet acceptable love between us that it felt inappropriate to have her anywhere than at home. But why could not I remember her name or where she was living? Finally, after a considerable period of recuperation, I recognized that I did not know this woman. As I came to terms with how phony my hallucinations were, I figured this was also a figment of my imagination. I fell into a deep depression, had no family or friends for a week, struggled to walk, battled with incontinence, and coughed up many liters of bloody mucus. I felt terrible for myself as I glanced out onto the hospital room's roof towards the mountains. I was sorry that I had almost died, but had nothing to show for it. I had a close buddy who had passed away, as well as 2 children who'd passed away. I suffered since I could not see my friend or my babies. Baby number 1 died at 16 months in 2007, and baby number 2 died at 8 years old in 2016. But there were significant variances. My hallucinations were mostly bad, and revolved on me being bound to a hospital bed or chair. The persons in my hallucinations were either genuine nurses or someone I had seen before, such as the 2 hallucinated nurses who resembled NFL player Richard Sherman. The difference in this lone bright spot was the love. When I think about it, I can still feel the affection. I can smell the scent. Something I've never done in a dream before, but for the most part, I can see and recall this woman's face. In fact, I cannot get her off of my mind. There was family affection and great care, yet the image in my memory is of someone who was a strong familiar resemblance, which I never noticed when talking to her. It has never been explicitly verified to me that I communicated with my deceased and malformed newborn daughter, now a 30-something-year-old perfect lady, but I believe I did. And I believe she saved my life. More significantly, I had the impression that she had been there all along, assisting my, or her, family in ways that I simply did not comprehend. I recall that man, the one about whom I was unconcerned. I knew I would see him the next time I came, but I assumed I could come anytime I pleased. There has to be a reason why I sensed his presence and felt his love, yet could not see his face. I'm not sure what the cause was, but I believe I recognized him. He was 8 years old when he died. I'm not certain I died. All I know is that physicians continually prepped my wife for my death. But I was definitely on the verge of death, and I had a strong sensation of the love beyond the veil.